Everyone, thank you guys for being here tonight. My name is Dan Rabin. I'm the club's director of player development. I recognize a lot of the names and faces that are here today, so thank you guys for being here. I'm going to share my screen in a moment so everyone can follow along because this is I want to spend an appropriate amount of time on this presentation, but also give time for some questions at the end as well. So let's get started. Always start our presentations with a reflection and a reminder about our mission and our philosophy, because we're more than just a soccer club. We're committed to building players and coaches and teams of strong character, committed to achievement on the field and in our community. And we have our philosophy or tagline, which is developing champions for life. We have our core values, which is really our North Star, the way we have to guide ourselves as we navigate through kind of this confusing landscape of youth sports, which is fun, integrity, fairness, teamwork, and stewardship. We ask that you as a coach, as a leader of a team, to live our values and rep the red. A couple introductions. I'm here, Darren Patricio, who is our Minis and Rec 1 director. Both in terms of admin and technical advice and direction. And then Chris McKay may also be here today. Chris McKay is one of our recently appointed referee development coordinator. He is someone you'll probably see along the fields if you're coaching first grade on up, out on Saturdays working with our referees to get them some additional education. One thing I do ask is if everyone can put themselves on mute if you haven't already. And we're going to have plenty of opportunities to ask questions along the way. First and foremost, welcome back to soccer. It's been a long break. I'm sure we've all managed these breaks a little bit differently, but welcome back. And again, thank you, and thank you. You as a coach always play a tremendous and vital role in any youth sports program, but this year is unique. It's something that in my 20 years of coaching and say 35 years of playing and involved in the sport is going to be one like none other. So what we're going to spend a little bit of time on today is a few snapshots on our safe return to play. This is not all of the protocols. This is some of the key protocols, specifically addressing what they are, why we have them in place, and how we as coaches can implement them. We ask that you hold questions till the end. A lot of the questions will likely be answered along the way, but we'll use the chat feature to address them. And then one thing I do encourage everyone to do, if you haven't done so already, is to visit our website for the full protocols. They are online under the COVID-19 tab. We have put a lot of energy into creating videos and documents and slide decks and graphics. We know that everybody learns differently. So hopefully that range of material will find its way so that we as coaches can all learn them, live them, and love them. Okay, so let's talk start with a little bit of background. We have our safe return to play, and this is our protocols. It's also the name of our committee. And first and foremost is safety is paramount. So we formed a committee back in late April or early May to start sketching out how we're going to create protocols that will help keep everyone safe. And so this committee was formed that has created and is monitoring and revising and enforcing policies along the way. And it's also tasked with reviewing cases for what we refer to as a pause in participation in the event that someone has been exposed to a known COVID case, someone is showing symptoms, or someone has been diagnosed with it. But ultimately, we've created a common set of guidelines that hopefully will mitigate the risks involved in participating in soccer. A lot of inputs that were utilized to create these policies. Some of these are requirements, others are best practices, but we've pulled information from the Centers of Disease Control, the Forward Virginia Plan, that is the name of the governor's reopening plan, which ultimately will dictate a lot of the policies that we have to follow. We've also been liaising with the county health department, and we have a direct line to their director for specific issues. And then U.S. Soccer and Virginia Youth Soccer Association have also issued their best practices. So we've pulled a lot of information from a lot of different sources and then tried to coordinate it into a system that makes sense for us. A few key concepts to recognize. First, there is risk. We are not diminishing the risk that's involved. We are not underestimating it. And if there's one thing that this virus or pandemic has shown us, is that we shouldn't be underestimating it. So we have to acknowledge that there is some risk. That being said, soccer as an outdoor sport that has a lot of movement, it can be adjusted to limit contact exposure. And that is one of the advantages that soccer has over some other sports. So a few other key policy acknowledgements is that we're trying to stay current and informed on the latest research so we can make adjustments along the way. We, since day one, have been learning from and collaborating with different clubs in different sports. Other parts of the country have reopened earlier than Virginia. Other clubs across the country have started playing soccer earlier, and we've been able to pick their brain about what worked, what hasn't, what would they do differently. But ultimately, we're trying to create common sense adjustments to mitigate risks, and then ultimately educate and enforce these policies. So let's talk about 4 key principles: masks, distances and close contact, the pre-play questionnaires, and reporting of cases. So as I mentioned, these are key principles, and the full protocols are available online, but we're going to highlight some key ones. And I took this picture from the internet because if you follow the NFL and you watched the NFL return, there was a great disparity in mask use, and if you follow the news, Sean McVay even came out and said, "Yeah, I think this policy reminder about keeping my mask on was about me," because he's wearing his mask like he's wearing it as a chin beard. So let's talk about the purpose of masks. It's designed to reduce the spread of respiratory droplets and aerosol spray. And there was a great article today from Medium that discussed how these sort of droplets and spray are likely the primary cause of COVID-19 spread. So when we have a mask or a face covering, it should pass a birthday candle test, which is it should be thick enough that if you were to try to blow out a birthday candle, you would not be successful doing so. And ultimately, your mask keeps your droplets in, and it keeps others droplets from entering. And when we're all wearing the masks when we're supposed to, it creates 2 layers of protection. So this is one of the reasons why masks are required by spectators at all times and by coaches at all times, but it's limited for players because it's not needed while they're playing. They must wear them to and from the field, and then when they're sitting out of games. So when you have a player who's a substitute and they're waiting to enter, they should be waiting with their mask on. Before they enter the match, they can put their mask away, and then when the referee permits them to enter the match, or when it's the end of the quarter or half break and they're rotating in, they can then re-enter. But for us as coaches, we need to wear them at all times. And all times means all times, to and from the field, in the parking lot, before practice, during practice, after practice, in pregame, during the game, during breaks, at postgame, and then especially when we're giving instruction and direction. This is the most critical time we need to wear masks, because we as coaches, maybe, I don't know if we like to yell, but we're prone to yelling. And yelling increases the projection of these droplets. And we've seen likely in the news certain situations such as choir practices in church where people who are in a confined space projecting have caused a large outbreak of the virus. So although it seems counterintuitive because we as coaches want to be heard and want to be able to impart our knowledge, safety is paramount. So in these critical moments when we're trying to address our team, your mask must be on. So a few tips to help us. Try to deliver your key info at appropriate times. And that might be in pregame, it might be during key stoppages, it might be during halftime. You're not necessarily going to be able to coach in the flow of the game all the time through a mask. It can be done, and I've seen it. And it may not necessarily be the most effective, but there are other methods you can use. You can use your body to illustrate points. You can bring a player closer to the sideline to deliver some information so you don't have to yell across the field. But also recognize that our constant direction and instruction is a form of joysticking, and that's not really an effective method of coaching. As a personal anecdote, probably about, let's say about 12 or 13 years ago, I actually lost my voice. I had a nodule grow on my vocal cord. I had surgery to remove it. I was under the impression that my voice would return in a couple weeks. It actually took 6 months to recover. And I had to talk like this for an entire season, coaching kids. And what that actually did is it made me a better coach because I learned how to choose my words more carefully. I learned how to illustrate points differently. And it's something that what it actually really did for me on game day was because I couldn't project across the field to players, it actually gave me perspective of how little control we as coaches actually have in the flow of the game. So yes, there will be times we need to deliver information, but there are different methods we can use to coach players. So let's talk distancing and close contact. We want to reduce close contact with potential carriers. And the CDC refers to close contact with a couple different principles, but how they apply to soccer is that when we are within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, if direct physical contact occurs, and if there's a droplet transmission. We have to recognize fully that soccer is a contact sport. No one's going to dispute that. It's not the same contact as it might be, say, for basketball or American football, but it is a contact sport. And other risks can be mitigated by the fact that we are outdoors, that we can manage distancing of the players who aren't participating, and outside of, say, first and second grade swarm ball, there's not going to be a whole lot of contact throughout the game. And even in those first and second grade, that scrum that can form because kids lack spatial awareness quickly disperse after a few seconds. So our rule of thumb when it comes to distancing is 10 feet while practical. And that's something that comes from the governor's Forward Virginia plan. We are trying to keep participants 10 feet while practical. That's not practical in the flow of the game, but it is practical in other moments. So let's talk about those other moments. We can, and these are the examples we're going to discuss. The spacing of players on sidelines, the distance of coaches and players, the distance from referees and the touchline, avoiding unnecessary contact, avoiding snacks, shared equipment, and then minimizing large groups and gatherings. So let's hit these one at a time. When players are on a sideline, what we want to try to do is create a station for each. Every coach received extra cones this season in their equipment bag. And you can use those extra cones to create these stations. And you can use other markers as well. But you try to arrange them off the field and away from play so that each child has their own individual place to put their water, their backpack, any other equipment that's 10 feet from each other, and then also at least 10 feet from the field of play. We also, as coaches, want to keep our distance from players. So your coaching position should be done off the field. And in reality, even pre-pandemic, we should still be off the field when coaching, because that allows us to see the entire play. And for those of you guys who are following along with a visual presentation, that first video or that first picture shows me on the field interfering with the play. Meanwhile, there's a group of kids behind me and there's one kid on the ground. I'm only seeing half the play. But if we can observe from outside the field of play, we can keep our eyes on all the players. There will be times where we might want to stop the play, or when the ball goes out of bounds, and we use a natural stoppage to direct your players. So avoid close proximity when you're intervening in the flow of the game. So in that second picture, you can see that I'm on the field coaching the players, but I'm keeping a distance from them while I have my mask on. And then ultimately, when we're delivering these points, keep any sort of team talk, especially when they're gathered together, as brilliant as or as brief as possible. And the old expression I like to use is be brief but brilliant. And that is also a pre-pandemic coaching point. Deliver your information as quickly and in few words as possible, and get the kids back playing. In terms of referees, and I'm a full disclosure, I'm a Michigan State grad and a Big Ten fan, so you'll see that in the next few slides. We as coaches need to keep 10 feet at least from the touchline, meaning the sideline. I witnessed a few games on Saturday where coaches were straddling the touchline, and some were even on the field. And to one coach, I had to go up and tap him on the shoulder and say, "Coach," well, not a realistic tap, a metaphorical tap on the shoulder, but I had to pull him aside and say, "Coach, the rule is 10 feet from the touchline, not 10 feet on the field." And he had a good laugh about it. But we need to keep our distance, because it helps to ensure that we're keeping distance from players while they're participating, but also it helps to keep us from referees. So for those of us who are coaching 5th grade or higher, we are likely to see 3-person crews, meaning you will have a center referee and 2 assistant referees. The assistant referee needs room to move up and down the sideline and to see the sideline. So when you are wearing your mask and you are keeping your distance, you are protecting the referee. If you are not wearing your mask, or you've pulled it down, or you're straddling the sideline and interfering with the referee, that's a problem in a normal stage. It's an incredible problem now, because you are compromising that young official. So please adhere to the 10-foot rule, and also recognize that we have a zero tolerance policy toward referee abuse or assault, but it takes on greater effect now, because those sort of referee confrontations where we want to get into a referee's face to argue about a call or why a call wasn't made, it cannot happen. We have to have that greater perspective that bad officiating occurs at all levels of play and in all sports, and no amount of complaining is going to change that. So recognize that, and then also recognize that by confronting a referee, you are also compromising their protection. How do we manage that? Well, try sitting. It's a remarkable experience. Bring a chair, sit for the game, and choose your moments. All right. You might also, for those of us who have multiple assistant coaches, task someone with being your holdback coach. If you ever watch football, there's always a coach who's yelling at players and yelling at coaches to get back, right? So maybe that's a task that you can delegate to an assistant coach. But also, ultimately, let's accept some of the limitations that we have as coaches. We like to think that we can manipulate key moments in the game, and there are some certain moments where we can influence. But ultimately, if we're trying to joystick players and teams while standing on the sideline, literally on the sideline, we're losing a focus here of what's most important, which is letting players have decision-making abilities. So there are solutions besides running up and down the sideline like a madman. Let's try that, and you will be amazed at how liberating it is. We also have to avoid unnecessary contact. And for us as coaches, that means avoiding touching players if we're teaching a technique or a concept. It also means we have to avoid touching players when we're praising them, whether it's a high five or a fist bump. And touch in a normal circumstance is an incredible, powerful tool to connect with individuals. But we have to be very cautious with that. So whether it's between us and another coach, or us and a referee, or us and our players, or players to players, we have to avoid handshakes and huddles, high fives and team cheers, celebrations, post-game handshakes, and referee good game fist bumps. Find alternatives. You can, when you are teaching, you can paint a picture with your body, use your words, have a player demonstrate. But there are other methods we can use besides having contact with players. Come up with new rituals. I give my U10 girls team air fist bumps when they approach, right? When we do our team cheer, we spread out and I say, imagine your arms can stretch like Elastigirl, and you put your hands in the middle. We recognize the other team by giving them a good game applause. We recognize the referee by giving he or she a good game applause. So there are still ways that we can replicate that level of connection without the physical contact to help show people that we care and to reward them accordingly. So a few other things here. Snacks. I coach U8 boys and girls, and I had a conversation with a young boy named Derek, who's turning 7 in January. And Derek told me the other day, Coach Dan, I'm really sad. And I said, why are you sad, Derek? He said, I've been playing soccer for a couple years, and this will be my first game without snacks. And part of me was like kind of laughing on the inside, like 7-year-old problems. The other part, like, it really took me aback because it showed you that for this young child, snacks is an important part. And we, as a return to play committee, had a long conversation about snacks because it is part of our youth sports culture. So ultimately what we decided was that the risks involved far outweigh the reward. And those risks include that piranha-like frenzy of kids, whether they're wearing masks or not, all quickly grabbing for Rice Krispie treats, or someone making a homemade good that's not quite sanitary, or potential spread of viruses via surfaces. So there is, and I'm discovering that there is changing in research in regards to the spread of this virus via surfaces. It's not quite as extreme as we all thought back in March, but the virus can still live on symptoms or live on surfaces. So we've decided to eliminate snacks, one less thing for families to organize. And if it is a critical element for that child's joy of the sport, then encourage families to bring their own snacks to reward their child with after the game. In terms of some shared equipment, there is some shared equipment that we want to avoid. We want to avoid having kids touch cones or share vests or share goalkeeper shirts or gloves or share water. So this is where, as a coach, we have to pick up our own cones. And for me, sometimes with younger kids use a lot of cones. So I probably increased the number of steps that I take in any given practice because I have to pick up all the cones, which I look forward to that change occurring once we can all go back to that level of normalcy. But until then, we have to pick up the cones. If you are utilizing scrimmage vests, it should be in a vest exclusive to the child wearing it. If a child rotates out of a vest, make sure they're not sharing it. So for those of us who have goalkeepers, 3rd grade on up, then you are going to want to have enough scrimmage vests for each goalkeeper who plays in that game. So just make sure that you're monitoring. And in that picture, for those of you guys who are following along, create 2 different piles. Create a pile of clean vests, create a pile of dirty vests, and then make sure you wash them before the next practice. Any sort of equipment that you're going to be using, especially if your site has micro goals, make sure the coach is moving them and not the children. And know that soccer balls are going to be shared. But if you are bringing soccer balls, especially the game ball, make sure you sanitize it prior to each match. So one other last kind of element about this physical distancing is minimizing large groups. And that's the critical element to help prevent spread. So a few things the club has done is that we've created an additional buffer time in between games and sessions. So there should not be a lot of overlap, if any, when one team is exiting and one team is arriving on game day. But there could be the potential, but we've tried to extend those game lengths to avoid that. We've tried to spread games out across multiple fields. Some locations are unavoidable, but there are others where we've done that to try to avoid those kind of large gatherings from occurring. What can happen at the team level? And these are some things that you as a coach can help enforce, is to wait for those previous groups to depart if you're arriving. We'll likely see that more on practice days than game days, but make sure that that group has departed before you set up. For families who are attending, whether it's a game or practice, they need to remain 10 feet from each other and also, at least 10 feet from the field. And when they sit, they should sit as a household. We ask that families avoid family reunions, bringing grandma, grandpa, cousins, aunts, and uncles all out to the game. We're not limiting it to just one parent per household, but that's the encouragement. But when everyone does arrive, they can stagger their seating or even sit in non-traditional areas, which might even include within the penalty area or behind the goal. But then also we can encourage people to depart quickly. So we know that part of the joy of being a team sport is that social element. And we don't want to eliminate that completely, but we do need to eliminate those impromptu gatherings where everyone's together in close proximity and talking, because that is one mechanism in which the virus spreads. The third point that we're emphasizing today is our pre-play questionnaire. And this is something that everyone should have received via email personally from me. And you should have received two email. One is your survey, one is a database, and we'll check on those. We'll talk about those in a moment. And the pre-play questionnaire is a part of our two-step home wellness check, which requires members to take their own temperature and then submit their pre-play questionnaire, which is 4 short questions about whether their child has a temperature, whether their child is showing any symptoms, whether they've been exposed, whether they've been diagnosed, or whether they've been exposed to anyone in those circumstances. And it's required for all participants. And it's something that should be completed the day of the event, preferably 1 to 2 hours before. So everyone should have received a survey link and a database link. And your database will look like what it shows in the screen here, where you have a list of players and dates where if someone has been cleared with their survey, they've got a green light. If someone has failed in their questionnaire, they have a no. The dual purpose behind these questionnaires is to help screen individuals, making sure that the individuals are asking the questions within their own family and making that a habit, but then also tracking attendance within your team in case there's a confirmed COVID case, because that will allow us as a committee to determine the best course of action for those individuals within your team. And there might be a pause in play if someone has been exposed to the virus. I don't want to spend too much time on the pre-play questionnaire because there is a full tutorial video available online. So if you have questions about it, please review that tutorial. If you have issues with your survey or database, contact Karen Buer via email, and she is very responsive and she will fix the issue for you. In terms of some best practices, here are a few things that I've done and I've seen other coaches do that work very well. As players enter the field, greet them and just ask them how they're doing. See if they're feeling great. And if we're coaching younger kids, they may not be able to illustrate their points, but also kids are brutally honest. If they say, "Coach, I'm not feeling very good today," well, that's a pretty good sign they shouldn't be there. So whether or not they've been exposed or diagnosed or are symptomatic. So greet the players, send them to their station, and while they're waiting on their station, bring out your phone, check your database, and clear them. Johnny, you're good to go. Benjamin, you're good to go. Riley, hang tight. I'll be over there in a moment. Because maybe Riley's survey isn't populating, or maybe Riley's parents didn't complete it. So you might need to pull Riley's parents aside and have them do it. So this is an easy way to just quickly take attendance. Think about how children kind of in gym class or PE class sit in rows and the teacher takes attendance before they all run amok. There are ways we can handle that as well to make sure that you are keeping accurate attendance and the pre-play questionnaires have been completed. The last critical element is our reporting of cases. And this is another critical element to our collective safety. So the Safe Return to Play Committee, in addition to creating these policies and monitoring them, also reviews cases. And we receive notification from families directly because those who are following the rules will contact us if they're supposed to, and they're also instructed to contact us if they fail their pre-play questionnaire, and we are notified if they fail that pre-play questionnaire, which prompts us to follow up with them. However it comes to our attention, we collect additional information, and then we have a scenario and risk and action chart, and that determines an outcome. It's something that we have worked with the county to form, and it helps us quickly resolve a case because people want to know whether or not they can play or whether or not they should be removed from play. And all parties are notified. So if you as a coach have a player who has been had their participation paused, then you'll be notified that Johnny Smith is not permitted to participate until Thursday, September 24th. And they're free to rejoin practice on that day. And that's something that we'll follow up with you to make sure you're in the loop on and that the families are in the loop on as well. So your role within these cases, if you're contacted by a family and said, hey coach, we think we might have had a COVID case, we're going to keep Johnny out, refer them to safetoplay@loudoundsoccer.com because we need to know this information. It is also not your responsibility to take that decision on yourself because it keeps you from being the bad guy. You're not the one telling them to stay at home. It's Loudoun Soccer, but it also keeps you from creating a harmful situation in the event that the advice you give them is incompatible with our protocols. So don't put yourself in the middle of it. Just pass them on to us. But if some family does approach you, please let us know. And let us know if there's a concern within your team or a questionable case within your team. And if you personally have symptoms or are being diagnosed or potentially exposed, please let us know as soon as possible. This early action is critical. And there is always an element of tattling or ratting someone out. And that should not be a factor in our decision making because our collective safety is far more greater than being labeled as a tattletale. When people do report a case or an issue, every effort to protect one's privacy is taken, whether it's a case within their family or if someone is contacting us about a potential case within their team. So recognize that privacy is protected, but also recognize that this is a step that's needed for our collective safety. So a few other tips and ideas as we wrap up. I can't tell you how to live your life, nor can Loudoun Soccer, but make wise decisions off the field. Your decisions off the field might impact your ability to coach on the field. And I can tell you personally, I don't feel comfortable sitting indoors in a restaurant right now. And even if that restaurant takes all the precautions, given my role in the club and ultimately the enjoyment that I get from working with kids, I will sacrifice certain elements of my life in order to preserve those others. And I can't demand that you do that likewise, but make those good decisions off the field so you can continue to coach on the field is what I urge. You as a coach also need to further consider the logistics of your activities and games and game day setup. So think about how an activity is going to flow, how you're going to rotate defenders, how you're going to manage the equipment that's involved, and that will help make your activities run smoother. Send constant reminders to your team. If you're not in the habit of sending weekly reminders about practices, games, uniforms, observations, encouragements, get in that habit, because your families will appreciate that level of communication. And you can continue to reinforce these sort of requirements until it becomes habit. The other big element for this, as you as a coach, is to model this appropriate behavior. If you are not wearing your mask, if you are not showing the distance, you're setting an example for your players and your families to follow. We, and I say we as coaches, as families, as players, as a club, we have to build new routines and rituals, all right? And that's some of these things that we as an individual need to do, recognizing that I keep a bunch of masks in my car. I keep a bunch of masks in a drawer. And if you need a recommendation on the masks that I wear, I will certainly provide them for you. And I'm not a paid endorser for any of them. But we have to develop these new routines. And then within your team, develop new routines and rituals. We can't bring our hands in the middle to do a team cheer. We can't put our arms around our shoulders to do a team huddle, but we can find other ways to build that sort of team culture. And then lastly, address, and I say quote unquote, bad families early. And these are the individuals who don't want to follow the rules. Either they don't follow the rules or don't want to follow the rules. And unfortunately, as we're seeing in society, there is not 100% buy-in in some of these ideas at the grocery store, at the ball field, at the school. So we're not going to get 100% at Loudoun Soccer. But when you see these individuals, kill them with kindness. Politely ask them to follow the rules. And if they want to create a confrontation or debate, it is not your debate to have. You can simply refer them to Loudoun Soccer. Refer them to safe2play at loudonsoccer.com. If they're a rec family, refer them to me, and we can take that off your plate. But we do ask that you as a coach set that example and address those bad apples when you see it. I see this sometimes, and I'm always sensitive. I grew up the son of a volunteer league president, and this was several years ago, many years ago, where there weren't a lot of paid professionals involved in youth sports. And I saw the demands that were placed on volunteers, and I, for many years, was a volunteer coach too. And I'm sensitive to adding more demand and more responsibilities to your plate. And I hear it sometimes, well, they're just volunteers, or I'm just a volunteer. And I say that's not the case. You're more than that. You are the coach of the team, and that means you're the leader, you're the guardian of the game, you're responsible for creating this safe environment, you're a steward of your community. You're going to leave your neighborhood and your town and this county and this commonwealth a better place after you left it. And your influence now, even if you're just coaching one season, will carry over for years in the future with the children and maybe even the families you're working with. We as coaches wear multiple hats in any normal year. And I like to refer to those hats as being a facilitator, as an educator, a role model, a guardian of that game, and a manager of risk. And for this season, that risk management requires greater attention. So this is not much different than previous seasons, because for those of you who've been with us for many years, or those of you who are just starting your coaching journey, there are policy changes that occur on an annual basis. Just within the last few years, we've seen heading go away from the younger age groups, and new concussion protocols and safe sport training. FIFA publishes new laws of the game that go into effect every June 1st. We've seen a change in playing formats. We've seen a change in age group formats. Ultimately, we have new rules that we have to deal with every single year. And for this year, we have some more safety rules that need to be enforced. And this is not about agreeing or disagreeing with the rules or the rationale. It's about the health and wellness of our families. So everyone needs to do their part. All of the resources that we've gathered are available online. And as I mentioned before, we have these videos and graphics and documents and slide decks. And even and we also have staff. We have our Safe to Play committee. That we have access to the CDC and their information, as well as the county health department. So there are resources available. And if there's something that I personally can help you out with, email me and I'll communicate with you or set up a time to speak with you or even meet with you on a Skype or Zoom call. But I want to make sure that you know you're not alone, because we are providing these resources for you. A few final thoughts to kind of wrap us up. All of these safeguards, all these adjustments represent a series of safeguards. And when they work together, they provide a true safeguard. So recognize individually, masks, good. Distance, good. Masks and distance, even better. So if we can find ways to take them all and apply them, we stand a better chance of being safe. We also have to accept that these changes are here, and they're likely going to be here for a while. So the sooner we can adopt them, the better. And some of these changes, there's a lot of bright spots. When I go back to talking about Derek and how depressed he was about not having snacks, I talked with him about the silver linings, which were, well, let's think about all the bright things that we can think about. That we get to play soccer right now, and we get to be with our friends, and we get to run around, and we get to be outdoors. Those are all pretty good things. And even though it's okay to be sad about not having snacks, let's be happy about the things that we do have. And the silver lining is a lot of these protocols that we're now adopting, they're going to make you a better coach. So as I mentioned that this was a critical year, this might be the most critical year of youth sports in the history of youth sports, because kids need this experience more so than ever. Distance learning has its limitations, and the way kids can interact with each other has now become limited. So their outlet in sports, especially in a team sport, is so vital. And that makes your role as a coach more important than ever. And there are little things that we have to do. And frankly, I don't think anyone wants to wear a mask or anyone wants to keep their physical distancing, but these are things that we have to do. And it's all for a good purpose. We have a video that's out there, and you can find it on social media, but it's called "Learn the Rules, Follow Them, so we can play." And it's a series of vignettes from kids in our travel program. At the time, our rec program wasn't starting, so we filmed the travel players discussing what it meant to them when soccer was taken away and why important it is for them to have it back. If you haven't seen the video, it's 90 seconds. Watch it. It's not, Oscar worthy, but it might make you shed a tear, and it helps to create some perspective in regards to what we're doing. So I want to thank you guys for being here. I want to thank you guys for being part of our club. And I'm going to stop the screen share and go back to the questions and answers to see if we have any questions that I can address. I am recording this presentation, so what we'll likely be able to do is publish it later. And my general thought with a lot of the people who are on this call is that my suspicion is that I'm preaching to the choir, that you guys are the ones who are enforcing this anyways. So if I am and you're doing this all right, great. I hope this was advisable and it given you some more information, and then ultimately you can help set that example for maybe some of the others to follow. So I'm going to flip through the chat real quick, and then if there aren't any questions to answer, we'll bid ourselves good night and see you guys on the field on Saturday. So I see, yep, so couple suggestions. So there was a question in regards to what do we do if the questionnaire is not populating in our database? Chances are there might be an issue with the data that families are submitting, or there may be a disconnect in your database from the questionnaire. So contact Karen Buer, she will fix that for you. the question from Coach Caputo in regards to how do we handle a parent who's not wearing a mask. So this is something that is a delicate situation because you have ultimately within the rules of soccer, parent behavior is the responsibility of the head coach. And that is in a normal situation. So if a parent is yelling at a referee pre-pandemic, the referee could tell you, coach, you need to take care of this parent. And the similar approach is here. Now, what I have found is that the individuals who are not wearing masks either are completely ignorant of the rule, so you just have to remind them, or they want to be confrontational. And what I found either way is to pull them aside and just simply say, hey, Mr. Smith, we need you, the league rules require you to wear a mask. And chances are they have a mask in their car because everyone's keeping a mask in their car because that's what you need when you go into the store. So I would not make a scene out of it. And you might even work with the referee and say, he's not listening, feel free to eject him. I think ultimately we want to try to be cool and calm in that situation, and I think for the most part people will, but if you run into a situation where they are not going to resolve it peacefully, contact me and I will deal with it for you, and I will deal with it perhaps less diplomatically than you, because as much as we want to allow for everyone to have their opinion, these are the rules and these are what we need to follow. So the couple other things, best way to clean and disinfect balls and gears. In terms of gear, washing, what I've found is that I think it's less of an issue of the temperature of the wash, but more of the temperature of the dryer. So high heat tends to kill the virus. For disinfecting, I make my own disinfectant. Right, because back in the day when Lysol and disinfectants were flying off the shelves, I bought a high grain rubbing alcohol and mixed that with a few drops of essential oils for a decent smell, and I spray down my cones and equipment after each practice, and then I let them sit out on my porch, and that tends to help it. Coach Wilhelm, you're going to receive an email tomorrow in regards to modified rules for High School 77. They're also available on our website. And then Coach Wiseman, I think that's Eugene. In terms of the questionnaire, if a family shows that they've completed the questionnaire, they get an email confirmation. That's sufficient as well. And then make sure you notify Karen Beer so she can address it. All great questions. Any other questions for in the chat box? No? Okay. Thank you guys. I honestly, I can't thank you guys enough. It's I mentioned in the email I sent you that 2020 has not been kind to any of us, and some have been inflicted more by its challenges than others, and it was very emotional. It didn't hit me until maybe Sunday or Monday when I just thought about, wow, kids were on the field playing soccer on Saturday. Like that is such a milestone. And I grew up in Michigan, and Michigan is just now getting back to playing soccer, and all the kids have to wear masks and while they're playing. And it's something that I feel grateful for what we have. I'm saddened to a point of what we don't have, but really optimistic that we're going to be able to continue this safe environment so that we can continue to play. And I thank you guys for your role in that, for continuing your vigilance and diligence. And if there's anything we can do as a club to help, just let us know. All right. And with that, thank you guys. Have a good night. See you on the field.